Chapter 19, Fish in the Air. Graham said, "Where did we leave off with Peeby? What was happening?" "What's the matter, Gooseberry?" Gramps said. "Did that snake bite your brains?" "No," she said, "it did not bite my brains. I was just trying to refresh my memory." "Let's see," Gramps said. "Mr. Berkway and Mrs. Cadaver were whacking a rhododendron and they put it over the dead body, and then Peeby's mother burned the brownies." Graham said, "And Peavy and her sister were acting like spoiled chitlins, and they got another message. In the course of a lifetime, what does it matter?" "I like that message." Gramps said, "And didn't Peavy want you to tell her your daddy about Mrs. Cadaver and Mr. Berkway hacking up her husband?" "Yes, that is what Phoebe wanted, and it is what I tried to do. One Sunday, when my father was looking through the photo album, I asked if he knew much about Mrs. Cadaver. He looked up quickly. 'You're ready to talk about Margaret?' he said. 'Well, there are a few things I wanted to mention. I've been wanting to explain,' he said. I plunged on. I didn't want him to explain. I wanted to warn him. 'Phoebe and I saw her slashing and hacking away at the bushes in her backyard.' 'Is there something wrong with that?' he asked. I tried another approach. 'Her voice is like dead leaves blown around and her hair is spooky.' 'I see,' he said. 'And there is a man who visits her. Sal, that sounds like spying. And I don't think we should go over there anymore.' Dad took off his glasses and rubbed them on his shirt for about 5 minutes. Then he said, 'Sal, you're trying to catch a fish in the air. Your mother's not coming back.' It looked like I was merely jealous of Mrs. Cadaver in the calm light of my father. Oh, in the calm light of my father. All those things that Phoebe had said about Mrs. Cadaver seemed foolish. I'd like to explain about her. I'd like to explain about her, my father said. 'Oh, never mind. Just forget I mentioned her. I don't need any explanations.' Later, when I was doing my homework, I found myself doodling in the margin of my English book. I had drawn a figure of a woman with wild hair and evil eyes and a rope around her neck. I drew a tree, fastened the rope to it, and hung her. The next day at school, I studied Mr. Berkway as he leaped and cavorted about the classroom. If he was a murderer, he certainly was a lively one. I always pictured murderers as being mopey and sullen. I hoped Mr. Berkway was in love with Margaret Cadaver and would marry her and take her away so that my father and I could go back to Bybanks. What I found most surprising about Mr. Berkway was that he increasingly remind me of my mother, or at least of my mother before the sadness set in. There was a liveliness to both Mr. Berkway and my mother, an excitement, a passion for words and for stories. That day, Mr. Berkway talked about Greek mythology and how excited and thrilling it was going to be to have the opportunity to study a slew of wonderful Greek stories. When Mr. Berkway passed out the new notebooks, he said, "Don't you love the smell of a new notebook? He's and treat them gently, gently, and what treasures they lie within." In the midst of this, I started daydreaming about my mother, who loved books almost as much as she loved all her outdoor treasures. She liked to carry little books in her pocket, and sometimes when we were out in the fields, she would flop down in the grass and start reading aloud. My mother especially liked Native American, she said Indian, stories. She knew legends from many tribes: Navajo, Sioux, Seneca, Net, Pierce, Madu, Blackfoot, Huron. She knew about thunder gods, earth makers, wise crows, sly coyotes, and shadow souls. Her favorite stories were those about people who came back after death as a bird or a river or a horse. She even knew one story